Hello, everyone, and welcome to Digital Youth Future Talks. My name is Abdullah Rafi, and I am your Digital Youth Program Specialist. What is a Future Talk? Well, a Future Talk is an opportunity to connect youth and industry experts in the field of the digital ecosystem, specifically in Calgary, sometimes other places as well. If you didn't know, October is Cybersecurity Month. So we're going to actually be highlighting people in the field of cybersecurity. And we're actually sponsored by a company called Advantis 360. Advantis 360 is a local Calgary company, and it's a curiosity-driven organization committed to innovative business security. And today, actually, we're very fortunate to be joined by someone who works at Advantis 360, and that is Mohammed Azeem. And Mohammed Azeem is a senior IT security engineer and practice lead for the service delivery team. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. We're going to dive deep into it today. Mohammed leads and contributes to the master processes for all services and is the go-to for networking, infrastructure, next generation firewall, and public cloud. With over 20 years of experience in the IT industry, Mohammed has gained extensive experience in large, complex environments. Mohammed is well respected for his exceptional technical aptitude and consistently demonstrates service excellence. So clearly someone who knows what they're talking about in the world of cybersecurity. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us today. Where we typically start on a future talk, it's all about getting to know people. So tell us your story and who is Mohammed Azeem?
Thanks, Abdullah, for having me here. My name is Mohammed Azeem. I'm at Advantage 360 Service Delivery Team, where I work as a senior security engineer, providing solutions to various different clients in securing their network, basically.
Awesome. So we're talking about this world of cybersecurity, and we talked about next generation firewall and cloud, a lot of big terms for us, but I always love to kind of level set and just talk about what does cybersecurity mean to you?
Well, cybersecurity, if we want to talk about next generation firewalls, that could take up hours,
Okay.
basically, right? Same thing with the cloud is so emerging technologies these days. Basically, just in a nutshell, how firewalls work. The legacy firewalls are based on ports and protocols, where you stop the traffic from the perimeter into your network. Next generation firewalls means you are not just looking at the ports and protocols, you're now actually looking at application-based traffic too, right? You're not letting in, for example, port 80 coming into somebody's environment. This is a legacy environment, right? In a next generation firewall, you're actually saying HTTP, for example, that
Mhm.
runs on port 80, but now the next gen firewall can actually evaluate the traffic and seeing if it's coming on port 80, is it HTTP or is it something else, right?
Oh,
Those are some next generation features in the firewall. It's
interesting.
application aware versus just ports and protocol.
So I know, in my journey of learning a little bit more about cybersecurity and talking to different experts in the field, I always find it interesting that, cybersecurity is sort of this invisible to people who aren't in the field.
Yeah.
Clearly it's there when you're in the field, but it's almost like this invisible protection that is around sort of the layperson, the person that's using the internet every single day, digital every single day. What would be a good example of cybersecurity? If someone who doesn't know what it is or how they encounter it on a day-to-day basis, what would you say cybersecurity is and how do we interact with it?
Yeah, to be honest, most of the users are unaware of the security layer that is protecting them, right? Just example for my at my house, I do have a firewall at home, but my kids, my wife, they don't know that there's some sort of protection at the end of their traffic egressing to the internet, for example, right? So they're unaware of it. So it's hard for users to grasp that unless you're in this field.
Mhm.
It's mostly all over their head when you talk about cybersecurity to them is specifically. Yeah, it's hard to say basically how to comprehend when you're not in the IT field or
Yeah.
especially in the security field, for example.
But I think you give a good example of HTTP. So that's
Yeah.
something like if you have that, you don't have that, is that a safe website, not a safe, like, could you explain maybe where that sort of protocol comes into place to protect our personal data?
Yeah, so I was giving an example for traffic coming in on a firewall, explaining how the next gen firewall features work. But if you want to go in terms of what's protected and what's not protected, HTTP is clear text. versus HTTPS, right? Most of the sites today, even Google, when you go to Google, is all encrypted, right? So
Mhm.
that's HTTPS. Again, the users, your normal average users probably won't know the difference between HTTP, HTTPS, what's encryption, what's not encrypted. So yeah, from that perspective, going from inside to outside, you're going to Google, you're going to HTTPS, that is encrypted, for example, right?
Mhm.
So
And is
that's
there a
layman
risk?
terms.
Is there a risk in visiting websites or yeah, websites with HTTP without HTTPS on it these days? Or is that something as a person trying to level up their own cybersecurity, is that something that they should be concerned about, or what does that look like?
I would say so. Today on the internet, about 80% of the sites are encrypted, HTTPS. But yeah, if you're going to HTTP sites, it's a little bit concerning. Still, there are some really legacy websites that are still running HTTP. You can look at it as, it's clear text, basically. Whatever you're doing in that website is clear text. If there's a man in the middle, or for example, or some eavesdropping happening at that site, your data is unprotected at that level. So definitely a bit concerning, but
Mhm.
luckily, most of the website that you will encounter today, they're all encrypted.
Well, I heard you say man in the middle and eavesdropping. I know for someone
Yes.
who maybe doesn't know what that is, it does sound a little bit like, spy level kind of content
Right.
or topics.
Yeah.
What is that? What does that mean? And do you encounter that type of sort of not hacking, but sort of information on your day-to-day work?
Uh, Luckily, we don't encounter that stuff, but we put measures in place to protect the clients so they don't run into a situation like that, for
Mhm.
example, right? Make sure their encryption is up to date. When I say man in the middle, actually, firewall does that for you, right? So when you, for example, a user needs to, go to a website for Google, for example, the user will connect to the firewall. The firewall then connects to the Google. So the firewall then becomes a man in the middle. Why it does it? Because since, as I said, everything is encrypted, the firewall needs to know what traffic is going through that encrypted channel. So it becomes the man in the middle guy for you. It decrypts your traffic, inspects everything is okay, then re-encrypts and sends it to the end server. So that's what I meant man in the middle. But you can imagine instead of the firewall, there could be a hacker man in the middle attack, which can receive your information, changes it, and sends it to a different site or to a malicious website.
Oh,
So that's where the man in the middle attacks comes in. Eavesdropping is where you're trying to listen to sniffing some traffic and get get all the traffic that is entrusted to a hacker, get all the data that is going between a client and a server.
interesting. So that's something maybe we wouldn't encounter all the time because of things like HTTPS, I guess then. But still,
Exactly.
I
Yep.
think last week, a couple of weeks ago, we had a individual who was talking about pen testing and almost doing this at a industrial level. And he was
Right.
talking about leaving USBs on the ground and seeing if people would plug them in. And so that was interesting as well. But as a security engineer in the field, what does your work involved in cybersecurity look like? Is it dropping USBs on the ground, or is it listening to people's data? What is your work on a day-to-day basis?
Basically, it's protecting from all the stuff that the other individual might have been talking about. For
Okay.
example, taking up that example from USB on the floor, right? We protected your network from the internet inbound, right, at the perimeter level. But what if a user picked up a USB which is infected and plugged it in his computer, right?
Hmm.
What happens? Because firewall is at the perimeter level, not
Hmm.
at your computer level. So basically, there are other measures to protect against it, where you can have host-based firewalling and network-based behavioral and analytics as well. So if a computer was compromised and going to a malicious website, we will be able to identify, hey, wait a minute, you never went to this website, and this was considered a bad
Hmm.
website. So in that instance, we can identify, okay, this computer was compromised somehow, and we will be able to take further measures how we can protect it and isolate it from the trusted network.
Yeah, cybersecurity is such an interesting field because you
Yes,
could
yeah,
live your life without never knowing that there's a whole industry protecting your digital footprint, your digital data, not just
Right.
yours, but companies and infrastructures and governments' data. There's this whole level that's on top of everything that,
Exactly.
me, youth, people who just aren't in that field would never know about. So I find that really fascinating, but I would like to know what brought you to cybersecurity. So if we go all the way to Mohammed Azeem as a high school student, or your career pathway, what did that look like? Where did you start and how did you get into the job you are in today?
Right. Well, I never thought about IT when I was in high school, to be honest. Back in those days, I was good at in math. So naturally, I know my mom always said that you will make a good accountant. So that always stuck with me. And I always thought, I'll always be a chartered accountant or something like that. But I think it started changing when my brother worked for a big networking company, right? So he brought in a couple of laptops one day, and I opened those laptops and I started, playing around with them. I see Excel, WordPad, but I was curious. Like, I have two or three laptops here. How do I connect these
Mm,
together, right? Anyone at that time didn't have internet. It was all isolated kind of thing. So that kind of, made me think about more into IT field and started my career in Canada. I came from Dubai, basically. Started my career in Canada. I went to SAIT for my Cisco CCNA, very entry level, and that was the starting of my journey, basically in IT field. And interestingly, my first job was given by the my CCNA instructor at SAIT.
oh, wow, cool.
Yeah. So I started working with him. He had his own business in an IT environment. So I started as a part-time student with him. He knew me from his classes. Then I proved myself and started a full-time with him, and that was a start off for my career. From there onwards, you know, exceeded uh, my capacity because it was a small business, and then joined a larger firm in a networking field while doing all my CCNP level networking uh, studies. Security came along the way. A couple of my colleagues who were security experts, they introduced me to security, how the firewall works, and so that was very interesting to me. Then I started the same journey at SAIT. I started my security level courses, mostly done at home.
Mhm.
Ended up doing my CCI security, which is the highest level of Cisco security.
Awesome. So it's cool to hear that you got into IT because now, as we do more future talks, as we learn more about the digital ecosystem with different experts, IT and digital is this massive field. So you got into IT, you weren't in cybersecurity, but you finally ended up going into cybersecurity. If someone was really interested in the field of cybersecurity, do they need to be introduced into the world of IT through a different avenue? And then cybersecurity is something that they eventually achieve? Or is that something now people just go straight into cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think from my personal experience, like I didn't dive into cybersecurity as a get-go, right?
Mhm.
So, but I would say having a little bit of foundational knowledge of IT networking is a good thing before you dive into cybersecurity. I know cybersecurity is at a top level from an IT perspective, but having that foundational knowledge is not a bad thing.
Mhm.
But if you really want to just dive into cybersecurity, I don't see any big challenges coming your way. That there are no prerequisites, I should say, to cybersecurity, but having some foundational knowledge is always good.
Okay. And one thing we always like to talk about is this concept of horizontal skills. So almost where we have a youth who's really interested in IT, or maybe is not even techie at all, but there's always sort of these foundational competencies that sort of align well to almost all digital fields, sort of like critical thinking,
Yeah.
problem solving. Are there things that you think that youth should dive into or sort of nurture in themselves to, what skills complement cybersecurity is sort of where I'm getting at.
Right. Well, I was not a techie when I first joined this, and as long as you have the interest, right,
Yeah.
to explore more, to dive into it, again, it's you should be able to do it. And the foundational level, there are so many courses, so many videos out there, so much
Mhm.
material out there for anybody to dive into it, learn a little bit. Everything is do it yourself these days, right?
It's true.
Back in those days, it was just books. Now you have so much resources out there. So I don't see any challenges. If you're interested, you will be able to accomplish your goals, to be honest.
That's always a nice message, right? If you already have the passion, if you want to drive, no matter what or what you pivot into or what you try to do, you
Yeah.
typically will succeed if you try hard enough. I totally agree with that. When we're talking about the world of digital, we've talked about, or in future talks, we've talked to machine learning experts and full stack developers and all these different areas. And I'm always interested as someone who's sort of on the fringe of digital, this concept of fads versus trends. And I always talk about it to every single person I talk about. Cybersecurity, is that a fad or is that a trend, or where do you see that in the digital world for maybe someone who doesn't know about cybersecurity? And I'm talking about maybe youth that are listening to things like NFTs and
Yeah.
blockchain and this and that, where maybe there's some legitimate pieces, metaverse, for example. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some legitimate applications, but maybe it's also just in the news. What is cybersecurity like? Is that a fad or is that a trend?
I think it's definitely a little bit of both,
Oh,
right?
okay.
What you see on the social media today, they take it to the next level, right?
Mhm.
What's real, what's not, and so much emerging technology. I mean, you start talking about blockchain, and you'll see 100 answers, and probably 99 of them are not correct, or people don't understand. I myself, if I want to explain blockchain to somebody, I would struggle doing that, right? Um, so yeah, cybersecurity on top of that. How do you protect all that data? Yeah, you gotta investigate. It's definitely out there. You need to learn, and how do you implement that is totally up to you. And just don't go to wrong resources, basically.
That's the hard thing. You have to be skeptical and know where to go and where not to go when researching this stuff. But I think for my own research, cybersecurity looks like it's something established that what I love about cybersecurity, it's in all industries, no matter where you go, right? No matter what
Absolutely.
department you're in and what industry you're in, there's always going to be some sort of cybersecurity layer on top of it. So it's that piece where like it's almost foundational to what we do in today's society. When it comes to Advantis 360 and sort of the work you do, I like to think about, we have this big tech ecosystem in Canada, but why Calgary, right? What's technology in Calgary? What's Advantage 360 in Calgary? What's special about what you guys do?
Basically, I think we are a little bit more than Calgary as well. But
Mhm.
since this is our home base, being local, being close to our clients, that's the biggest achievement for us, right? We could do a lot of remote work, but having that face-to-face meetings with clients and being local just gives you that extra advantage. And you know, and we are a small team. So even though if we do want to go global, we might have to expand in that way. But we started Calgary. Let's give that a shot, right? Before we go global.
Mhm.
So yeah, being a Calgary-based company, it's natural that we start within Calgary.
Absolutely. And what do you think of the digital ecosystem here? I know when we talk about youth and when I look at reports, there's always about, hey, I'm interested in this digital field. I have to go out east. I have to go to this university. I have to go research here. What does the digital ecosystem in Calgary look like to you?
I think again, as I was saying, there's so many resources out there. Regardless of your location, you will
True.
be able to find what you're looking for. Um, State is a great example. I started there. The great IT opportunities there, especially the hands-on experience that you get at State. That's phenomenal, right? And that's what so intrigued me to go more into the Cisco world, basically at that time. Regardless where you are in Calgary, you can always get the information you need. From an ecosystem perspective, I think there are resources out there. It's just a matter of you looking for it and finding the right opportunity.
Very true. And going back to what you said before, if you have that passion and drive, you'll usually succeed in what you want to do and where you want to go. When it comes to cybersecurity, what do you see on the horizon, for example? What's interesting out there? What's that sort of next step in, because it seems like you have a ton of experience in the field. Is there something emerging in the world of cybersecurity that you'd like to pass on as a message to us and something cool that's coming out of your field?
Yeah, the emerging technologies, I mean, as you probably heard, everybody is moving to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
So how do you secure your cloud? So we specialize in that. People are moving to the cloud, and that is true. So how do you secure that workload in the cloud? So being Azure or AWS or Google, uh, all the workloads are in the cloud now. So cloud computing is some sort of emerging technology, and securing that, putting that cybersecurity layer within the cloud, it's even a little bit more complicated than just being on-prem, for example.
Mhm.
So I would say if you're talking about emerging technology, yeah, cloud computing
Next
is
step.
the word. Yeah,
That's cool. It's always nice to do that because even when I was young, I remember my teachers or the people in the field that I was looking at, they would always talk about, for example, one of my engineering teachers was always like, if you're going into engineering, it's going to be all about glass. So go into
yeah,
glass. And then now there's,
right.
skyscrapers, everything's glass nowadays, right? So it's cool for youth when they hear the word, oh, cloud computing, maybe they can get that edge up, right? They get to university, they take a couple more cloud computing
Yeah.
courses, or, take it upon themselves to research cloud computing. It's always cool to see what's coming up next in that world. So super cool there. One question also we like to ask in future talks is cybersecurity. If I'm not techie, is there a space for me in that world, in that field?
Absolutely. And as we were discussing, cybersecurity is everywhere. So without you being aware, you are somehow connected to it.
Yeah,
Either
that's a good point.
it's so why wouldn't you want to be actually understanding it and
That's
operating
true.
it without being a techie? I think it's so interesting that you would want to dive into it. Again, the prerequisites are at minimal. So if you are not a techie at all, there are so much resources out there that you should be able to familiarize yourself with the foundational level,
Mhm.
and then of course there are so many programs, excellent programs out there that you can enroll and find yourself, at a very professional level.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're coming to near the end of our future talk, but I always love to provide the opportunity to our speakers to sort of go back and think about you in high school, or you as a youth, whether it be for cybersecurity or not. What would your advice be to Mohammed Azeem as a high school student?
I would say pick a target. Uh, Focus on on what you want to do. I think that comes from a personal experience as well. When I first started at SAIT, doing my very entry level courses, one of my fellow students, he asked me, "Where do you want to see yourself? Actually, where do you want to go after this course?" I said, "I'm gonna probably go to the highest level of Cisco security level, CCI level." And I could see the smirk on his face, like, really? It's like, well, that's what I was trying to get at. The moral of the story is like, pick a target and stick to it, right? I think, and 10 years later, I am a CCI certified. It was a long journey, but I had that target in my mind all the way when I first started my IT career. And with the focus and dedication, I think you will be able to achieve.
Beautiful. Very inspiring message. I love to hear that. And you have this end goal in mind, and it's okay if the path looks a little bit like this, or you change
Yeah.
routes and you go somewhere, but having that end goal in mind, I think is super important, and it's a good message to leave off there. Any parting words, Mohammed, about cybersecurity or Advantage 360 or the world of cyber altogether?
Yeah, just as I was saying, keep focused on your target. There will be a lot of challenges, I would say, right? It's not just cybersecurity. Through life, you'll encounter a lot of challenges, but there are solutions out there. Even though you failed the first time, I failed miserably on my first attempt on my CCI security, in a way that I wanted to give up. I
Mm,
didn't want it to pursue. It was so hard, and knowing that how tough the course was, my first attempt was so miserably failed, but I never gave up, right? I kept my focus, kept doing it, doing my labs, and at the end of the day, you will achieve what your goals are.
awesome. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you for sharing all about Advantage 360, about cybersecurity, your journey, your career pathway, what made you successwe're actually breaking down some of those really complex terms in the world of cybersecurity and digital to finally so we can understand them. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
For sure. Thanks for having me.